Hello, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited for today's MBALaunch Alumni AMA. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear from women that have gone through this program before, have been in your shoes, and I'm really excited to dive into our conversation. Before we get started, I'm going to do some introductions. I'll do a brief overview of the work that we do here at Forte and talk briefly also about the launch program. And then we'll dive into learning about the experiences of our wonderful alumni. My name is Ashley. I'm the director of pre-MBA programs here at Forte, which means I get to oversee all of the programming for candidates like yourself that are considering an MBA in their future. I have two wonderful colleagues that work with me on this program specifically, Sarah Dewar and Melissa Graham. Melissa is here with us today as well, so she'll be helping out in the Q&A, so big thank you to Melissa. And if you're just learning about Forte for the first time, I'm excited that you're here, excited to be on this journey with you to your MBA. Here at Forte, we're all about changing the balance of power in the workplace. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been around for a little over 20 years and have grown in that 20 years to be a network of over 125,000 women in business. We have an amazing alliance of undergraduate and graduate partner schools, corporate partners, donors, and amazing talented women like yourself. We are here to help you reimagine what's possible in your career and help you achieve more. We do that through programming like we'll talk about today, our MBA launch program. And specifically for our pre-MBA audience, a lot of the work that we do is made possible by our partner schools. So we do work with over 50 full-time MBA partner programs across the US, Canada, the UK, and Europe. These programs support the work that we do through programming, as well as providing Forte fellowships, which are named scholarships for candidates that support the mission of Forte. We also work with over 30 executive and professional programs. So if you're thinking about full-time, great. If you're thinking some other format, great. We got you covered here at Forte. In addition to programming like the MBA launch program, we also have other opportunities to engage. I do want to mention upcoming, we have a virtual forum, which is an opportunity to engage with those over 50 full-time partner programs that I mentioned. That program is coming up on December 6th. So that's a wonderful opportunity if you want to talk to schools, learn a little bit more about the work that we do here at Forte. Also, today is not the only way to learn about the launch program. In 2 weeks, we'll have an application overview. So we'll actually walk through all the specifics of the application to MBA launch, and then a full information session on December 10th. So if we don't get your questions answered today, we certainly hope to see you at a future event as well. Today, though, we will be focusing on learning about our MBA launch program, more specifically our cohort programs or our live program. We do offer a couple other flavors of launch. We offer a on-demand asynchronous version that opens in the spring. And if you're a current undergraduate student, we also offer an undergrad version of MBA launch. But we're going to spend today talking about that cohort program. And this program is an 8-month application prep program to help you really build your best application to business school. Big cornerstones of this program, obviously, first are application prep. So actually making sure you have all the components ready for the application. Also accountability. So maybe if you're new to this process, if you don't have anybody in your network that might be going through an MBA, you don't know anybody with an MBA, not only we're going to help you build that network, but also help you understand the timeline and help you be accountable to that timeline. And finally, probably most importantly, is an amazing community to join. You'll get a taste of that today. Typically, the cohort has about 650 participants from all over the globe. So it's a great way to connect with other women that are striving towards an MBA as well. And our 2025 cohort, which we're recruiting for now, will start together in February. So on February 4th, 2025, everyone will start together. There is an application for this program, which I'll get to here in just a second, as well as an enrollment fee. The things I do want to mention, again, it's a 8-month program. By completing the program, you do get fee waivers to over 50 of our partner schools. And this program is designed for candidates that are thinking about applying fall 2025. So the application process that would be fall 2025 to matriculate in fall of 2026. And or if you're applying in fall of 2026 to matriculate in fall of 2027. As far as actual curriculum goes, I mentioned all the components of the application. But really what we want to try to help you do is understand this as a holistic process. So first, starting with helping you define your personal brand and tell your story through the application process, then diving into application and admissions insights and the actual components of the application. And importantly, helping you think about financing your MBA, which is a big question mark for a lot of students. And if you've not yet taken the standardized exam, if you've not yet taken the GMAT exam, we do provide test prep as well for candidates. I mentioned there's an application to go through. It's a really short application, should take you less than 2 hours, and that includes the essay. You'll give us some information about your background, give us some information about your employer. We're not going to contact them, but we just like to know what you're doing professionally. The program is designed for candidates who are working full-time, so you do need to be fully employed to be doing this program. And then you'll complete an essay, either a video or written essay, telling us a little bit about why you're interested in an MBA, why you're thinking about launch, and how you identify with the mission of Forte. There is an application fee. By being here today, there is a discount on that application fee. So instead of $35, just pay $15 with the discount code ForteFam25, which I believe Melissa will put in the chat for you as well. And the next deadline, if you're interested in joining us in February, will be December 8th. Which I don't know about you, but is actually very soon, alarmingly soon. Just about 2 weeks from now will be the deadline. Now, if you want some more time to consider, holidays are crazy, feel free to apply in that January deadline. By applying earlier, you find out earlier, so you have a little bit more time to plan. The application process is not necessarily a selective process, so it's not, I wouldn't worry necessarily about not having a seat in the cohort, but really what timeline works better for you. Great. That was my very quick overview. If you have any questions after today, feel free to send us an email. My colleagues and I are happy to help answer those. But for now, I am excited to dive into this AMA. So I am joined by 4 amazing former launchers who are here to talk about their experiences. So what we're going to do is we will start with some introductions. So I'm going to have each of our amazing panelists today tell you who they are, a bit about their background. So when they completed the launch program, if they're in an MBA program now, they'll tell us about that. And then a little bit about their background. So where they did undergrad, what they studied, what they did before their MBA. And then again, for those of you that are farther in the journey, tell us a little bit about what you're going to do after the MBA. After those introductions, I have some prearranged questions that we'll go through. And if we get through all of those and we have some time, we will absolutely take some audience questions at the end. So with that, we're going to do some introductions. I think I'm going to go in the order in which I think you have, like, who's farthest along, if you will, and we'll kind of work backwards. So I'm going to pick on Catherine first, because I think Catherine is kind of farthest along in this process. So Catherine, if you don't mind, introduce yourself.
Of course. Thanks so much. My name's Catherine Flessel. I'm a 2022 launcher. I'm in my second year at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. When I was doing the launch program, I think I was 4 years into my career. I'd started my early part of my post-undergrad career in e-commerce and made a switch into consulting. I graduated from Dartmouth College in 2018, studied economics as well as Asian and Middle Eastern studies. This summer, I spent 12 weeks with Salesforce. And post MBA, I will be joining McKinsey full-time in San Francisco.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Hannah, you're next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Clark. I am part of the 2023 launch cohort, and I'm currently a first year at UCLA Anderson School of Management in the full-time program. If you couldn't tell from my header, but I went to undergrad at USC, so I've made a bit of a switch with grad school, and I studied communication with an emphasis on entertainment, and I worked in entertainment on the studio side for about 6 years before coming to get my MBA. I, over the summer, will be interning in the LA office for a Bain & Company, so I'm pivoting into consulting.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. I think it's a toss-up between Erna and Morgan. So Erna, why don't you go first and then go to Morgan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Erna Roth. I am just a recent alumni of the Forte program of this year. I'm at the beginning of my journey of doing the application process for schools this upcoming fall term. So I've currently been in the workforce for the last 4 years. I've been mainly on the government side in Washington, D.C. with policy issues and public issues in the Department of Justice. So my pivot of going into really focusing on business schools, kind of addressing the gaps that we have within government sectors, working with business sectors. So that is why I really was very excited to be part of MBA launch. And that's why I'm pivoting to business school.
Awesome. Thanks, Erna. And Morgan.
Awesome. So like Erna, I am a 2024 launcher. Um, Prior to joining the launch program, I was working in healthcare. And so my undergrad, you all have to follow me here. So my undergrad is in history with a minor in Spanish, and my intention was to go to med school, but I pivoted and I got my master's in healthcare administration. And so with that, it was like my introduction into business with healthcare still being at my core. And so I was working for a healthcare consulting company for 2 years. And then I recently pivoted to a federal consulting firm. And so now getting more into the intricacies, as Erna said, about policy and what it looks like for consumers to receive healthcare.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. I love that you all have very diverse and different backgrounds also. So hopefully this is a good testament to the fact that there is a place for everyone in business school, regardless of what you did. You all have amazing backgrounds, not things that are always so traditional when it comes to pre-business school employment, certainly. Morgan, I'm going to stick with you and ask you our first question, which is how you found out about the launch program and what was it about the program that made you decide it might be a good fit for you?
Yeah, so I learned about the program from an alum. And so she was sharing her experience and how it was really pivotal in helping her understand the journey to MBA. And so I was very unfamiliar with what it all entailed. And so this was really like the perfect place for me to learn, okay, what does an MBA look like? Is it for me? And really understanding my why. And so understanding that and really the community that the Forte program provides for you is what helped me in moving forward and understanding like, yes, this is the path that I want to pursue.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. I'm going to keep going in my reverse order here. So Erna, you're up next, and then we'll loop back around.
So one of my friends was actually in the Forte network, not in MBALaunch, but she introduced me to the website and everything last February. So I feel that, so when I was doing my research, I saw the MBALaunch application, and she was really the only person I knew who gone to business school out of my entire network and community. So I asked her about MBALaunch, and she said she didn't take it, but if she could have, she would have. And so I started investigating more. And as somebody who's coming from a non-traditional field, which we're going to use air quotations because everyone belongs into business school, no matter what you've done. It really just helped solidify this, especially like I was so nervous at the beginning of am I really going to go to business school? Is this really right for me? And then I know we're going to get into that real big conversation of why I felt like it fit with me. But that's when I saw the MBALaunch application had 3 days left before the final submission in January. And I stayed up for at least 3 hours later than my usual time to work on it. And then I got in, and I was super excited and looking forward to this community for the next 8 months. So that's how I got introduced to MBALaunch.
Awesome. Thanks, Erna. Same question to you, Hannah, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I had a mentor at the company I was at recommend that I look into getting my MBA. And so I would say I was more in the exploratory Googling phase of the MBA process, where I was just like would finish work and be on Google looking up application deadlines and rounds and learning about the process. And I stumbled across a YouTube video where someone mentioned MBALaunch and kept going down that Google rabbit hole and found the program and applied. And that is really when I started getting serious about applying to business school.
Awesome. And Catherine, what about you?
My story is fairly similar to some of the other launchers, but I was exploring the possibility of an MBA in 2020 because it was COVID and I was switching jobs and trying to think about my next steps. So I spoke to a high school classmate of mine who was on her way to Kellogg in the fall, and she had told me she'd done the launch program, much like others had mentioned. So it was one of those things that was kind of in the back of my mind. I didn't actually end up pursuing the program until a full year later, but it was from a former launcher and alumna of the program who also recommended it for me. And for me, it really was an accountability exercise. I was working a really busy job, and I knew in order to actually get through the MBA application process, I was going to need some sort of motivation or cohort experience to get me to keep going, because it is a long journey.
I definitely think that's an important piece because you are busy, right? You're trying to balance all of these things going on. I think that's a good segue into the next question, which is, I mentioned the program is designed for candidates that are working full time. We expect that there's going to be some balancing that you'll need to do. Obviously, you have to keep doing your job, and then you're thinking about this very personal endeavor. Does anyone want to speak to kind of how they managed the time commitment? Any advice for launchers that are thinking like, oh my gosh, I now need to add this other piece into my life? Any kind of time management? Erna, I saw you take yourself off mute, so I'm going to assume you want to jump in here.
I just thought about this and I didn't want to lose my train of thought, but I kept thinking it as not only holding myself accountable, but in replacement of like creative outlets, whether of, okay, once a week you have to sit on a Zoom session, where I considered it like a podcast that was really beneficial to me to help hold me accountable. And I got excited about it, as well as I think a part of it, it wasn't as overwhelming because it was as if you were doing work on yourself. So in my time frame, with the work that I was doing, it only took up about 3 extra hours of my week at most, whether it was me like looking at schools, actually attending the MBA launch sessions or the other information sessions, besides studying for exams. That's a different component. But it was really helpful in the sense of, because I knew this group was going to help hold myself accountable with all the check marks and the task assignments that we had throughout the time. It was really beneficial to me, because also holding just that point of where it felt like I was able to really help myself with this, and there was a group of us, was able to help hold myself a little more accountable than I was expecting myself to do. I didn't feel like I was alone the entire time, because eventually when we got even into our smaller group cohorts, where we had about 10 of us in a group, we were all messaging each other throughout the months and process, being like, what do you feel about this session? How did it go? And just really holding each other accountable and supportive, where it helped me a lot to hold myself accountable and do the work during Forte. And I can't express how thankful I am to have been a part of it.
I had something else I wanted to chime in on the time management. I think it sounds really scary to do 8 months and commit yourself to something. But if you think about it, instead of doing everything all in a 2-month process and really rushing everything, by doing it over 8 months, you're really building good habits and spreading out the process over a longer period of time. As I mentioned, I was a consultant. I was working 60, 65 hours a week. Building in an hour to 2 hours a week was much more palatable than 2 months of really intensive time. I frankly didn't have that time to do that much work right at the end and applying. So I was building basically this habit of, the 2 hours a week that I was investing on the program in the front end. And then kind of as the program progresses, the priorities shift around. So you'll spend more time on like developing your story and writing essays and thinking about later in the program, but you've already built the good habits of the early part of doing your exploration, self-discovery work and thinking about the schools you actually want to apply to. So I think that's really critical and was very helpful. Another tidbit, I had already taken the exam. So it actually took one less thing off of my plate during that 8-month period. I know not everyone's taken the exam when they join this program, but it's one thing to consider is taking the exam out of the picture as another time management system.
Yeah, and something I wanted to add in terms of prioritization and time management, if you are able and have the flexibility to block an hour on your calendar, like for work, so it's like you're setting that intention for yourself for the day. So whether it's like your lunch hour or maybe like 3 to 4 o'clock, if like your day kind of lightens up towards the end, that's really helpful in terms of making sure that you are setting that time aside to make sure that you are up on what is required for the program, and then also getting ahead when you can.
Yeah, and I'll just add kind of more to the accountability portion. My supervisor went on leave in January, right before the program started. And so I was doing a ton of work, and the program kind of hit me like a truck when it started, and I wasn't ready for it. but I think there's a lot of accountability built in and a lot of support within that, and everything is laid out really clearly. And the team does a lot to enable you to do well and to, like, there might be some weeks where you fall behind and you can pick up the next week. And so there is flexibility there as well.
We sometimes joke this is kind of like joining a gym or like doing Peloton, of like, you have to do the work, right? Like, you all are the ones that have to show up to the webinars and study for the GMAT and do the work, but we're here to motivate you and remind you of why you're here and give you that guidance, right? Like, I don't do Peloton, so I like don't know what that involves, but I always think of, like, if you've ever tried to run a marathon, it's like, we don't expect you to, like, day one, like, all right, we're running 26.2 miles. It's like, no, today you're going to run 2 miles, and then tomorrow you're going to run 3 miles, and we're here to tell you what to do, but you got to go out and do the work, right? And I think sometimes, Hannah, that transition can be a little tough, but I love the idea that Morgan has of kind of like that time blocking. And we usually recommend, for every hour of kind of work that you'll do for launch, so typically there's at least 1 hour webinar every week, to block at least 1 hour for each hour to do work outside of that. So usually that's some sort of self-reflection. That might be some homework that we give you. And so, yeah, I think probably that kind of 3 hours a week is probably a good guesstimate of time commitment as well. As far as, obviously there's this investment of time in the program, but the program also costs real dollars, right? We are asking you to invest in the program. It is highly subsidized by our partners. I think a lot of candidates think, like, all right, if nothing else, the waivers, right, on the end. But anyone kind of want to speak to the actual cost of the program, and did anyone kind of do that math on, all right, I got to pay, $675. How am I going to kind of recoup that cost, or what am I going to kind of get out of the program? Did anybody do some ROI? Yes, Hannah.
Yeah, I can speak to this. So one of the reasons that I wanted to get my MBA was to give myself more financial security, because I was not super financially secure before going into the launch program. And so that 675 was a big investment for me. But I think looking at everything that the program provides over the span of 8 months, whether it's community, whether it's direct access to schools, or kind of that roadmap that they give you to apply versus, I mean, eventually the cost of business school, and then what you might pay for some other programs or individualized help, I think it is absolutely more than worth it, even to just have that accountability partner. Or for me, a big thing was being around people and learning just the language and the lingo of getting your MBA, because there is almost a different language to learn and a process to pick up. So it might seem like a chunk of change up front, but I think for everything you get out of it, like, it's hard to look at it up front and see the value, but now kind of being in school and looking back, like, I think I would have paid so much more to have access to what Forte gives you.
I think the other interesting thing that you kind of brought up here, Hannah, that we can follow this thread a little bit, since you've all now completed the program, is there any resource or experience that you had in the launch program that, now that you look back, was maybe more valuable than you realized at the time? So anything you're like, oh my gosh, I now realize that experience or that resource was much more valuable than kind of you initially thought, or maybe something you didn't even think about that was included, that you experienced and were like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that was a part of the program. Any unexpected benefits?
I think I'm going to go back to like the group that I talked about, because we get assigned groups within people that are kind of might be in the same regional area or even the same fields that we have been in previously. We were like over the transition of the 8 months, looking back at how we all were talking at the very beginning about business school, and then at the very end, how we are able to clearly articulate why we deserve to go to business school, because we're essential in business school at this point, and we deserve to have that spot in business school. Like, that shift in conversation, which is also important in your application process, really advocating on why do you deserve a seat at a table, or you're going to bring your own chair at the table at this point, was such an impactful part, because I feel that back in February, I wasn't really at the point of being able to describe, articulate, and even with our the consultants that came and did presentations, their presentations really talking about like, how do you advocate for yourself? How are you going to tell your story to come into this school? To then even, you may not know exactly what you're going to do after business school, especially for those who never really thought about going to business school and are switching fields of interest. Even just showing up in the application, being able to say, I don't have the exact idea yet, but here's some interest because I did not grow in this space. This is brand new to me, but I want to take the risk and chance for myself, and I would be beneficial to your program as well. It was super important, just even the conversation of how you really articulate your needs and your desires and your goals and aspirations to come into business school. I think that was really something I wasn't really expecting how well. I thought I advocate for myself every single day, but apparently now I do better after MBA launch about what I want to do.
I think that's something that we observe on kind of the program side as we're talking to all of the launchers. And Sarah and I talk about this a lot of how you all speak about yourselves changes a lot over the 8 months that we work with you. So oftentimes we'll have conversations with launchers. Some of them might be on the call today. When they speak about why they want to go to business school, to your point, Erna, there's a bit of like, I don't know that that there's a place for me. I don't know that I have the right background. There's kind of this doubt. And oftentimes when we talk to launchers after they've completed the program or when they're in school, and there's just this level of confidence of, I know that there's a place for me at the table. And if not, I'll bring my chair. And that's a very big shift. And I think that serves you well as you head into business school with that level of confidence and that you belong there, right? And I think that sense of belonging is really important as you head into business school, which is also going to be its own challenge in many different ways as well. Anything else here? Otherwise, I'll continue on. So Erna talked a bit about the community, right? So the peer groups that you might be meeting with, talked a little bit about kind of interactions with schools and advisors and alumni. I'd love to have kind of some more insight into the community as a perk of the program. So how did you all take advantage of the community? Do you have any suggestions or advice from launchers as you think about joining this community of other individuals?
I can jump on this one. So I actually had 2 different communities given to me during the launch program. One, I believe, I was in San Francisco before Wharton, and I believe one was just San Francisco based people. And then one was more sort of West Coast, LA, San Diego, Orange County. And I used both those groups pretty extensively for peer support. I remember there was one launcher, she actually applied much later than I did in the cycle. I applied round 1, she applied round 3. And I was her person to call when she was having questions, concerns, things that she was struggling with, because I'd already kind of finished my journey and she was right at the beginning of it. So she was someone that I could talk to and feel like I was a resource for. On the other side of that coin, actually now post-launch, I met up with another person from one of the other groups over coffee at the Salesforce Tower. And I was debating if I wanted to stay in tech or go back to consulting, and she was a sounding board for me. So even beyond the 8 months of having these small groups where we talked about resumes and our essays, I actually have been using these resources as my extended network of women in business. And I think that's been a really valuable part of my launch experience. Actually, one of my very best friends at Wharton is a launcher from my same class. So I think the communities are really valuable in the moment, but they're almost more valuable beyond the 8-month experience as you move into for some of you, the business career for the first time, or for many of us, the next stage of our business career.
Yeah, I can double tap on that as well. I think I didn't know anyone who was getting their MBA or applying to get their MBA when I started the MBA launch process. And to have that peer community was so important, especially I went to visit a school in my application process for a conference, and flying out and landing and having familiar faces in the room that I didn't know before the MBA launch program. I don't think you realize how important it is to have those connections, and just literally a friendly face across the room can really open up an experience for you and make it seem so much more like warm and friendly. And I think adding to what Catherine has said about those connections continuing, there are women at Anderson with me right now who I knew all the way back starting at the launch program. And so you can go into school kind of having a little bit of a community already built in, which I think is a great underrated part of the program, is knowing people when you show up day one for school is really comforting.
There is also this extended network to what you all spoke about as well, which is we've now had over 6,000 women go through the launch program. So the other thing that happens is you might see there will be launchers that are second year students as you join an MBA program. There will be launchers that are alumni. The program's been around for a long time now. And so you're going to be meeting them as you continue. And Erna even mentioned this earlier, there's other portions of the Forte network, whether you're meeting fellows or you're meeting women at our conferences, there's this large network that you all get to tap into. But I do think that kind of launch cohort is such a pivotal experience that can really shape the experiences that you have. And yeah, I think it's just so nice to have that commonality when you join a program. It's like, oh yes, like I actually know somebody who's here. And you have that friendly face. Yes, absolutely. We are going to I'm going to kind of have some open-ended questions now for you all to kind of talk about maybe some highlights that you have. And I do want to give a big thank you to Morgan, who has to depart early from this call, but thank you, Morgan, for joining us today. So I wanted to ask you all kind of what was your favorite part of launch? So I will let you all interpret that how you want. To feel free to talk about a part of the program or a person or whatever that might be, but I would love to hear everybody's kind of favorite part of the program, highlight of the program. Hannah, jump on in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one resource that I didn't utilize until later in my launch process was office hours with the MBA launch team. And so Sarah was kind of my point person. And so every other week we had a standing meeting and I would just kind of like hop on Zoom or like Google Meet call with her and kind of tell her all my hopes, dreams, fears. We did resume reviews. We talked about kind of everything under the sun. And I felt like she got to know me as a person and could give me so much better advice, and that she like really cared about me because of all of that. And so I think if I had started those office hours kind of from the beginning of MBA launch, I think I would have kind of extracted even more value and really gotten a lot of bang for my buck. But I think just being able to hop on a call every other week, one-on-one with someone, and have them know my story and be able to help me tailor what I wanted to say to these schools was incredibly valuable.
I agree. Sarah is valuable. Yes.
I will plus one that I also had some crises and Sarah was there for me, and Ashley too, actually. Definitely great resources. I think not necessarily my absolute favorite, but a favorite or a highlight was having Angela Guido come and speak to us. I believe her company is called Career Protocol, and she does advising for MBA admissions as well as career coaching. And she's fantastic at what she does. And she charges a lot of money to do it individually, but we were able to have her join us for launch, I believe 2 different times, and speak to our group and provide us some really great resources. I still think about some of the things that she told us about how to think about your story and how to think about your career. I think she's a phenomenal resource that the launch program brings to the group, and definitely a highlight getting to see that she was on the schedule for the week.
Yeah, Erna, go ahead.
I will also third office hours, because just in general, that's going to teach you how to, when you're actually going to filter out what schools you want to go to, you're going to end up doing office hours or admission sessions with the schools, or even having one-on-one sessions to the advisors. Having a reflection of our office hours with MBA launch actually helped me articulate what I really was worried about, and being able to ask the school those questions directly with confidence too. Sorry, my dog decided to drink some water as I'm speaking. Though I think one of my favorite sessions though, and I know people are overwhelmed with the concept of how am I going to pay for business school? Juno, the company, came and did a session during my year, and the resources and the way of just even thinking about how I'm going to pay for this just helped me think out of the box or even start looking in advance. Like besides Forte fellowships, what other opportunities are there going to be out there for me to help pay for school, but also some of these fellowships might also land me an internship. So I even have in my notes on my computer all these potential different types of fellowships or scholarships that in the session when we had with Juno really taught me how to just even investigate and look. And it doesn't have to be always specific to business school. I know there's a part of me that wants to go back and take an intensive language when I go back to school. And so as a grad student, that makes it, how do I articulate, why is this going to be beneficial to my MBA career as well? Even that conversation, learning from that session was super helpful because I'll be able to apply to that scholarship and then know that I most like have the confidence to get it. So that was really beneficial as one of my favorite sessions during Forte.
Yes, thanks, Erna. And actually, that was a good segue. There was a question from an attendee here about tips about financing your MBA. And so, yes, we have our great partner Juno come and talk about financing your MBA, because I do think one of the things we hope you start doing while you're in the launch program is just thinking about financing. So not necessarily that like during the launch program, like, okay, I gotta start applying to scholarship, but like start thinking about the money and the time commitment of an MBA. And obviously, if you're doing a full-time program and you're stepping away from work, you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to have a salary for 2 years. Now your internship will get paid, which is usually a nice pay. But you do need to think like, okay, I got to pay rent. I have to buy food. And so Juno does this great session for us. Anybody else, as we're kind of, taking this little segue for a second, want to talk about kind of the financing piece, either resources in the launch program that helped you or anything that kind of, as you started thinking about this, was helpful as you considered financing your MBA?
I think something that the launch program really emphasized is start saving your money before you need to think about it. Like don't buy a car the March before you want to apply to business school, because it's probably not a good investment when you want to make an even bigger one. So I think just the financial literacy of thinking about the degree and kind of doing those internal calculations of the return on investment. Is a full-time or a part-time program better for me? How is each going to help me in my careers? What does that ROI after school look like? Is something that I think the launch program won't do everything for you about that, but it'll set you down the path and being in that mindset of like not only what school is best for me, but what makes sense for me financially.
Yeah, because there is.
Yeah, I'll echo
Go
that
ahead,
for
Kath.
sure. I was just gonna say, I was gonna echo that. I hadn't really thought about my plan. You know what tuition is, you know what maybe your rent is, but there's more to business school beyond just paying for rent and tuition. Like there's clubs and trips and dinners in the city. So being part of launch also revealed and exposed some of those things that you might want to start saving for as well. Things that you should be excited about as part of the MBA experience if you're part of a full-time program. So it is just also that knowledge too, Hannah, like you were saying, is like, oh, there are things to save for and I should plan, this is 8 months in advance. I have a year plus to start building that nest egg for, my trip to Columbia instead of the car, for example.
Yeah, and I do think about that financing piece. That's pretty important because, again, like, yes, for a full-time program, it's usually easy to kind of see that ROI. Okay, let me look at starting salary as I look at a program and kind of think about that. There's some kind of math you can do there, right? But there's all these kind of micro decisions, if you will, that you're going to be having to make along the way that will add up significantly to that. And so again, how do you approach those smartly? And that definitely starts before you set foot on campus. That'll start basically as soon as you start considering this, all the financial decisions. And so we try to provide you with a lot of resources there, but obviously that's a super personal process for candidates, but starting to help you all think about that as we go through the program as well. Great.
I think
yeah.
also just as a point, even if financial literacy is different for everyone, but even just the concept, if you pay off bills that you have that you are worried about before you even get to school, that's also helpful, just because it's going to look different for everyone. But whatever makes you feel like, I know when I get to business school, like I'm going to be able to handle this, or like figure out with my internship, I'll be able to cover this because I'm not carrying all this with me into business school, is helpful. And also really investigate where you want to go to school, the area that you are most likely going to be living in, and that will also determine if you might need a car, and hopefully that won't happen, but it might be. So just things to consider, especially depending on where you're looking at to go to school.
Absolutely. Yeah. The type of the location of a program can definitely determine some of the cost.
I also
Absolutely.
just want to add really quickly here, if you are looking at the numbers and are kind of scared by them, like it is feasible and it can work out. And there are scholarship opportunities and ways to subsidize your education. And so it's definitely something possible, and don't let that stop you from even going down the path.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hannah. Erna, I think you are considering part-time or executive programs. Am I recalling that correct?
I was considering part-time.
Okay.
Then also in the 8 months of transition, this is the reflection of I would rather go back full-time because I just want to, it's once again, maybe for the kind of career that I want to do, I'm even realizing I'm not really interested in staying in my current role to do part-time work because it's not what I want to do. I'm not as excited about it anymore. And so going back full-time is just also like, this is truly like a commitment of 2 years for myself to get this work done so I can be somewhere where I'm really excited to go forward with faster and kind of feel I'm finally at a place where I belong. So that's why I've switched over to, I'm going to go back to school full-time. There was part-time in consideration early on, but then 8 months later, Forte really helped me figure out what I wanted to do. So
Great. Thank you, Erna. There were a couple questions here about candidates that are looking at part-time or basically non-full-time programs. So part-time, executive, that sort of thing. And I will say, typically in the cohort, we have students like Erna who will change their mind. And sometimes it's from that part-time to full-time, and sometimes it's full-time to part-time. So I think that's a testament to this idea of critical self-reflection and introspection that will come along to really help you understand which format is right for you, because that's going to be a big choice for a lot of candidates. Typically by the end of the program, we usually see about 15% of candidates that are looking at part-time and executive. And the rest typically are looking at full-time programs. But I will tell you, it's not the same 10 to 15% at the beginning as it is at the end. So there's some flux that happens there. And so to the two questions that came through on Q&A, yes, you do not have to be looking at a full-time program. And you also can change your mind as you go through the program. And this happens a lot with candidates. We don't expect you to come in knowing exactly what you want to do. We don't expect you to know exactly what type of format you want, what your school list looks like, even what you want to do after your MBA may change. So as you're exposed to candidates and new ideas, that absolutely can change. Hannah, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah. I applied to both full-time and part-time programs. And so you can also, kind of back to the ROI piece, you can a little bit, I think, hedge your bets on and apply to both programs. And some schools have fantastic part-time programs that you might be interested, especially if they're local to you and want to keep your job. And then other schools you might be willing to move away and quit your job and start a full-time program for. So there's a lot of flexibility in applying, and Forte can help you with that too.
I think one of the challenges about understanding admission to an MBA program is, unlike the benchmark that maybe a lot of candidates have, which was applying to schools when you were in high school, the MBA process can be a much more, in a good way, chaotic change, where you can be applying to part-time and full-time. You could apply 1 year, decide not to go, and apply the next year. You could decide last minute to apply. So we have some candidates, we mentioned the program is designed to apply for fall of 25 applications. We've had many cohorts where, for various reasons, COVID being the most recent one, where candidates said, hey, actually, I'm going to apply right now. Like, I'm only 3 months into the program, but I've decided my plans have changed and my timeline has changed. We are here to provide knowledge and that accountability piece, but ultimately the journey is going to look different for each and every one of you. So we encourage you, as you're finding kind of what's authentic to you, and what sounds the best for you in your situation, to pursue that. We're here to support you in that. And certainly timelines will absolutely change, as well as format, certainly.
I can also speak to that. So within my cohort, all of us, I think, had completely different timelines. I applied on the very traditional round one early on the year I did the program. I mentioned my friend who applied in round 3. I know another woman from my group didn't apply until the full next year. And then another one who applied and ended up doing part-time instead. So in a group of, I think there were probably 10 of us, I can think of at least 5 of us with completely different timelines and journeys. And then I know one who decided not to apply at all because the Forte program helped her decide that an MBA wasn't the right next step. It was maybe something for the long-term future, but in the near term, it wasn't the right next step for her. So I think all of those are good outcomes of the program.
Yeah, and that's our hope is you find what's right for you, and that's going to look different for every one of you. We're not here to just make little MBA launch cookie cutter cookies. You all are going to be different, and the types of programs you apply to are different. And I think that's one of the nice things about the launch program is we get to see, kind of what we saw at the top, this diversity of background and interest. And that comes through in the diversity of schools that candidates apply to. It comes through in how they go through this journey and when they go through this journey as well, certainly. Great. My final question I want to ask all of you is piece of advice. So advice about MBA launch or advice about the journey. I don't know if you just have life advice, feel free to share that too. But any advice that you want to share with our audience today? Yeah, Hannah, jump on in.
Yeah, I would say a little bit back to the office hours piece is just don't be afraid to hop on the phone with people. It can be intimidating, whether it's with an admissions rep or a current student or someone from the MBA launch program. To like, you might think you need to have the perfect thing to say, there has to be a great direction to your conversation. But I think one of the things that Forte does is it kind of gives you a reason to be on that call in the first place. And so I think just not being afraid to chat with people, ask questions, tell them your concerns and see what they have to say is really valuable as you go through the process, and don't do it alone.
Thanks, Hannah. We love chatting on, so that's great for us too. Erna, what about you?
I think my main point of no matter your application is just as valuable at any round, just make sure that you feel confident about it. Don't feel rushed to do it early. Don't feel stressed out if it's not ready by round 2 and it's really going to end up being round 3. The school is going to watch you no matter what round you're in, the one that is meant for you and you deserve, really. And then also point of, I don't come from a heavy math background, and while I'm still about to take the GRE again, and even though I don't feel like I feel good that I'm gonna get a good score, I also know that score isn't the determination of I don't get to go to business school. I know I'm gonna do well, and then even part of the application process is I've already talked to, just for your information, if you don't have a background knowledge, heavy math knowledge, I've already talked with one of the schools and they were like, if you want to take some prerequisite classes, do it after you submit your application. Don't try doing it before your application. You can take like intro to accounting at a community college just so you can write in your essays. I plan to take a couple of these heavy quant classes so it can help prepare me in advance. So it's not brand new. It's more of a refresher once I start in the fall or the spring or whenever you do start. Just because math was I like math, but I don't like test math on the GRE. So that was a really big concern about like, how am I going to show the school that I'm really ready when I get there? And they're like, you don't have to stress out about that. You can just tell us that you're going to do that before you come to school, and just focus on your application and the exam right now. Don't overload yourself with stuff. That is also a really big point of holding yourself accountable, but also don't overload yourself at this time, because you don't want to burn out because the timeline of when Forte happens, it starts in February. You've been planning it out, whether you're doing the applications early, you're taking a GRE or GMAT early, but then at the end of the year where everything else is coming around and those round 2, round 3 applications get submitted, you want to take the time to take care of yourself, because burnout can also happen at this point, because this is a long journey, but it's worth every single second of it because it's investing in yourself.
And I'll round us out. I think it's okay to change your mind, but remember your why. There were many times during the launch process where I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for round 1. Maybe I should do round 2. I was debating if I was even ready at all. But then because I had spent all that time during the launch process, understanding my why, knowing my story, I was able to recenter myself and say, no, I'm ready. This is the time for me to do this. And I'm excited and I know what I'm going to do with every outcome that comes out of it. So, you know, I maybe changed the list of schools I applied to, but I didn't change when I was going to actually apply. So remember that you have a why you came into this program, and that can stand, but the details can change.
Great advice. Thank you so much to this panel. It was my absolute pleasure to moderate our conversation today. Great questions from the audience. Appreciate you all being here and giving back, and hopefully inspiring the audience today to think about MBA launch in their future. I did want to just remind our audience, if you all have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. We do have upcoming sessions specifically about the application to launch, as well as a broader overview of the program and the curriculum coming up the week of December 2nd. So we certainly hope to see you on one of those sessions. And again, big thank you to our panel today for sharing their amazing experiences. It was my pleasure to moderate our conversation today. We certainly hope to see your applications to the launch program in the future. And big thank you to Morgan, Erna, Hannah, and Catherine for their time today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Thanks, everybody.